We're joined now by AI and crypto czar David Sachs, super successful investor. I think the last time we talked to you, David, was up in Milwaukee. You came by our set, and we appreciate you coming by
And
again now.
host of the All In podcast, co-host of it, which I have to mention because my brother loves it, and I have to always be like, "Well, you listen to my show first," and he kind of pleads the fifth. So anyway,
Well, thanks, guys.
David, big news. Apple announcing they're going to invest $500 billion, 20,000 jobs. You are plugged in with the overall universe of tech better than almost anybody. How would you assess the first month of the Trump administration, and what do you see and hear from people in your universe as they are coming to grips with the new Trump term? How excited are they? What do they expect? What do they want? What do they need?
Well, I think the first 30 days has just been incredible. I mean, really across the board. I mean, the president has just begun the term with so much energy, so much action, so many executive orders. It's been a total sea change. I mean, just outside of economics and AI and tech for a second, I mean, the president's basically solved the border crisis within days. Biden, for the last year of his term, pretended that he needed congressional action to do that. And this was somehow a problem that was just unsolvable. And President Trump comes in there, and within days, he's basically solved the border crisis. It's just incredible. And so many other things are like that. And so I would say there's an overall feeling in the country right now that we can actually change things. We can do things. I mean, the government seemed to be this unfixable, problem, just basically this bureaucracy that, can never get anything done. And we just have to live with a border crisis. We just have to live with a $2 trillion deficit. And now you see that DOGE is going line by line through the budget, identifying the waste and fraud to eliminate that. So I think there's just, in general, this can-do attitude. And I think that with respect to tech, it applies to that as well. I mean, the president has promised that we're going to be rescinding regulations, unnecessary regulations. For every new regulation, I think an agency has to propose something like 10 more to eliminate, which shouldn't be hard, just given the sheer number of regulations that we have in. So I think in general, there's just a very optimistic attitude. And I think even in liberal Silicon Valley, there is, I would say, almost like a begrudging appreciation for what President Trump is doing. And you saw at the inauguration, the leaders of all the major tech companies were there. It's a very different attitude than I think in 2016, where, I think a lot of parts of Silicon Valley saw themselves as part of the resistance. Now I think they're fairly positive about the Trump administration. They may not all be saying that publicly, but I think they know that on the whole, it's going to be much better for business than the Biden administration.
David, it's Buck. Appreciate you making the time for us on the issue of AI. Got a lot of attention recently because of that moment where everyone freaked out about DeepSeek and is China going to get ahead of us? And without getting into the weeds on that, I just wanted to know, what do you think the strategic vision is for the Trump administration to stay ahead of China when it comes to AI, which obviously has enormous implications for the economy, but even for things like defense and beyond. So how do we make sure that we stay ahead of China, and what's that strategy look like?
Well, the president has been really clear that we just have to win the AI race. America has to maintain its global leadership, and even dominance is a word that the president has used. And in his first week, he signed an executive order stating that the goal of the administration was to win the AI race and maintain our global dominance in AI. And you're right about why. I mean, AI, I think, is the most profound and significant new technology. I think it will be, of this decade. I think it's a little bit like the internet was in the late 90s, but maybe even more important than that. It's going to have huge economic ramifications, and it's also a dual-use technology, so it has military applications as well. If we lose the AI race to China, it's just hard to imagine America maintaining its leadership in the world as the most powerful country. So if you care about the balance of power and you want America to be number one, it's just really intolerable to think that we could lose this AI race. So I think the president understands that. One of the things he did in his very first week was rescind this 100-page Biden EO that was a monstrosity of unnecessarily burdensome regulations, and with a fair amount of regulatory capture in there by certain companies. And so he, the president, I think, has a vision of allowing the tech ecosystem to compete and use that competition to spur us forward. At the same time, he's also identified certain critical enablers or building blocks of the technology that he's going to help unleash. And number one is energy, because these new AI data centers consume vast amounts of energy, much more, they're powered by GPUs as opposed to CPUs, and GPUs use a lot more electricity. So it's interesting. The AI race is very connected to the energy program that the president has, and so one will fuel the other. Then that's one of the major things that the president is doing now to make sure we win this race.
We're talking to David Sachs, AI crypto czar, part of the Trump administration. You've known Elon Musk for a long time. Elon voted for Joe Biden in 2020. I believe he voted for Hillary in 2016. He didn't endorse Trump officially until July in the immediate aftermath of the assassination attempt in Butler. When you see Elon being attacked as some sort of far right-wing zealot for trying to find fraud and waste in the federal government, what is your reaction as somebody that's had a long personal relationship with Elon? Would you have ever believed that he would be being attacked as a right-wing zealot?
No, and I think you're right. This goes back a long time. Elon was politically neutral for the longest time, but he leaned left or leaned Democrat. I think he voted for Obama, and I think at one point he voted for Biden, or said he did, and I think that's public knowledge. But the Biden administration did everything possible to alienate him, and it all started where I think at the beginning of the Biden administration they held an EV summit at the White House, and Biden didn't invite Elon, who created Tesla, which is by far the most successful electric vehicle company in the world, and is the sole reason that we have an EV revolution and why the United States is a player in EVs as opposed to it all being China or some other country. And not only was he not invited, Biden then goes up there and gives credit to Mary Barra for creating the EV revolution when, what she did at GM was a total failure. And that was just pure cronyism for Biden. I mean, that was the whole pattern of the Biden administration, is making life harder for entrepreneurs and then rewarding their supporters and cronies. And, that was just the beginning. It got much worse after that. When Elon bought Twitter and restored it to a free speech platform, that's when the left really declared war on him. Let's just be clear about that. I mean, Elon was a darling of the left because, again, he was responsible for bringing about the EV revolution, which in their view would help solve climate change. Whether you agree with that or not, that was their view. And it all changed once he bought Twitter because he wanted to restore free speech, and that's when they really came after him. And that's when you saw Biden say, we got to look at this guy, from the White House podium, we need to investigate him. And then they brought a whole raft of ridiculous investigations and lawsuits. Tesla was investigated for building a glass house or something absurd like that. SpaceX, which has national security applications, was investigated for not hiring enough asylum seekers, which is to say illegal aliens, which they're not even allowed to do under, ITAR, which is a national security law. So, the Biden administration did everything they could to alienate Elon. And then simultaneously, just, higher level, this is a feeling that was felt by many people in Silicon Valley, like Mark Andreessen, where they felt like the Biden administration was demonizing entrepreneurs and entrepreneurship. And, these are all people, in Silicon Valley who started from a more liberal mindset, and they gradually got red-pilled and moved Republican because, frankly, the Democrats became socialist. They became communist, or at least the faction within the party that represents that hard left was in control of domestic policy. So I think that it's not just Elon. It's lots of people got red-pilled. But, they didn't set out to be, they're not like right-wingers. They just believe in allowing America to compete and allowing entrepreneurs to create new businesses. Socially, they tend to be pretty moderate or liberal. But the Democratic Party just became so hard left that they became toxic to anyone in the center.
David, I think that's such an interesting analysis. Buck and I were out to dinner with a couple of prominent business executives recently, and they said that, and I know you were a huge part of this, Elon firing 75 or 80% of Twitter's employees and actually ending up with a far more profitable business was something that tons of managers, tons of owners have thought about doing before. It seems to be the blueprint now for what he's trying to do for fraud and waste. How much fraud and waste do you think, based on what you've seen, there is in our government expenditures? And how important was the experience of going through those cuts at Twitter to giving you an idea what to do here with the government?
Yeah, I was there at Twitter for the Twitter transition, and I mean, it was really remarkable. So Elon did some really simple things in hindsight that you wonder why they'd never done before. So, in a tech company, engineers are the lifeblood of the company. So Elon did something really simple. He just asked, or he looked at the code repository and just searched how many engineers have actually written code, checked in code, in the last several months. And something like only 50% of the engineers at Twitter were even writing code. And, that's their sole output.
Right.
So then,
if you're scooping ice cream for a living and you don't scoop any ice cream, that's a bad sign.
It's very easy to measure this. Yeah, I mean, the output is very easily measured. And I saw somebody, I saw a former Twitter employee on MSNBC complaining about this, how draconian Elon was, because she was required to, do a test to prove that she could code. Well, sorry, the reason why that happened is because half the Twitter employees weren't checking in code. So then instead of just firing them, Elon gave them a chance to complete a code exercise to prove they actually could code. And if they weren't willing to prove that they could code and they hadn't actually checked in code, they got fired. I mean, it's just they weren't doing the job, and it wasn't clear that they were capable of doing the job.
David, we're going to be coming into a hard break here in a second, so I just wanted to ask you one question that's crypto related. We're speaking to David Sachs, the crypto and AI czar for the White House and venture capitalist. For a lot of people who don't own Bitcoin and aren't necessarily involved in crypto, I think the question is, and I'll just give you, a minute to explain this or so. Why does crypto matter for everyone, for the country, for the economy, for the Trump administration? What is it that matters about this?
Well, I think crypto represents a new type of digital platform, but for finance or for money. There's a few different components to it. You got Bitcoin, which is a store of value. You've got stable coins, which are potentially a new kind of payment system. And then you've got just blockchains in general on which you can build new kinds of applications. And I think it's still very early to say what the innovation is going to be that comes from this, but it's a burgeoning area. It's a new kind of, you could call it decentralized computing platform, and new kinds of financial applications can be written on it. And so it's because it is, I think, a really interesting area of software, you just want that innovation happening in the United States. And I think that what the Biden administration was doing, they just literally declared war on crypto, and they were doing everything in their power to kill the industry, and they were driving all the entrepreneurship offshore. And, I think what we want to do is allow the innovation to happen here in America so that it's the United States that ultimately benefits from these startups and the innovation that they will bring. And there's just no reason to kill this thing in the cradle. Consumer protection can be achieved by having sensible rules around what people are able to do. But keep in mind that the biggest fraud in the history of crypto, which was FTX, was offshore in the Bahamas. And that's what happens when you drive, these companies offshore, is that it's hard to know the good ones from the bad ones. And so part of the reason why I think we want to allow crypto to happen in the U.S. and to allow the entrepreneurs to do things onshore is that it makes it easier for them to be supervised by regulators so that we can help tell the good ones from the bad ones.
David Sachs, crypto and AI czar for the Trump White House. Sir, we're going to need you to come back and talk more about the future and amazing things if you would make the time for us. So
Yeah.
thank you so much for coming on today.
Anytime.